you're with us today. And moments ago, Jerry said, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but basically never been a big Zach LaVine guy, but Zach LaVine might be a really good fit for the Kings right now. Correct?
Well, yeah, you got to kind of try to be creative as you can. I mean, the Kings don't have a lot of ways of improving, so there's probably going to have to be some risks. Now, the biggest risk with Zach, besides health, is contract.
Cha-ching.
And so you couldn't possibly get into that unless you could, basically make it work contractually. And of course, which means get rid of contracts very similar, but you'd have to combine them. And then so you're losing depth, but maybe gaining star power. And I think it's always
we can jump on the trade machine if you want us to try to find something that's going to work.
Well, I pretty well know what could work, but
how many players would it take, you think? 4?
3 would do it, because it just definitely 3 could do it. Maybe even 2.
Really?
Yeah, maybe. I'm not at all sure that Herder and Barnes wouldn't do it.
Okay, we'll check on that. Yeah,
I mean, you might have to, you might have to add something there. I don't know, but I mean, that's the risk, is the money. But I always say, in a trade, if you come out of it and the money's the same and the length is pretty much the same, which it would be, who's getting the best player? Well, if he's healthy and you expect him to be healthy for a while, well, you're getting the most talented player.
Right.
Not saying it'd be a better fit than either one of those guys, because you don't know. But then again, you've got a quality coach. You've got some established stars, guys. The Fox and Sabonis, he'd have to know he's got to fit in.
And he's on record as stating that he would like to come here.
Yeah.
Which, unfortunately, let's face it.
He's a California guy.
Yeah. And that has been an issue in the past for some guys with the Kings, and things have changed now. But for him to come out and say, yeah, I'd like to be there, that's good. I know that last year around the deadline, there were stories out of Chicago suggesting that the Bulls were having a hard time moving him, and they might have to attach assets to him. Now, that was before the deadline, and maybe that's changed now that you're not looking at the deadline. But if the Kings could get Zach LaVine without having to give up any first-round picks and maybe even get something back, that I'm with you. That looks like that might be the way to go.
Well, that'd be the key. Is I wouldn't give up a first-round pick. I mean, if you couldn't do it, otherwise, some other way, because and like say, you just have to really do your homework on the health issues. Because obviously he's missed time due to health.
Yeah.
Now, I think he probably could have came back. They were at the point where they'd already moved on. Kobe White had become the guy for them, and as an offensive player.
Not trading Keegan for him.
Nope.
How about we know that Minnesota, and they're playing Denver tonight. Minnesota leading 1-0 in that series, and Minnesota playing well. Rudy Gobert's not expected to play tonight because his wife just had a child, so he's not expected to play. But we know that the potential new ownership in Minneapolis has said, if we get in there, we're going to cut payroll. And that may be one of the reasons they're having this dispute now between the A-Rod's group and Glenn Taylor. But they've made it known they plan to cut payroll. If they do, one of the guys who could be cut loose, I mean, if Karl Anthony Towns were available and you're the Kings, what do you think?
Well, I think especially with Sabonis, he'd be a great fit.
Yeah,
because I mean, he's really a power forward can shoot as well as any guard in the league, which he's won the 3-point contest, which proves that. So, and he's young.
I mean, it's hard to imagine him just being like, "Here, you can have him." But if they're going to address the salary crunch, it's probably going to be a good player somewhere that they're going to have to part ways with.
Yeah, here again, the problem for the Kings would be creating enough room to take on his salary. Because you have to have cap room.
Yeah,
and so that would be tough, no question. And at some point, you got to probably re-sign Keegan and some guys. So there's some, there's a lot of issues there. But it'd be one guy that you'd say, oh, sure, if there's a deal to be made, and not saying there is, because I think be about 10 to 15 other teams that have more room and more assets available.
That's a key point. And I mentioned this last week. The way I'd been looking at it, Jerry, was what do the Kings have available? What does another team? Who's available? And I forgot about Well, there's a bunch of other teams also that if this team has somebody available you like, well, then there's a lot of other teams that like them too. And how do your assets match up against theirs? And it's not always favorable for the Kings.
No, it's really, I think Kings are in a tougher spot than just about everybody that way. But there's teams that really have enough cap room, they could almost take him and give him other things. So if that's what the T-Wolves want to do, I suspect that, I just can't see that as a very wise move on their part, to be honest with you.
I know.
I just think that might be, a little bit of, shooting one over the bow to maybe make guys think in terms of less money going forward.
Yeah, I'm with you. How about, we talked about already, Brandon Ingram? Apparently New Orleans doesn't want to extend him. So if they don't want to extend him, they might want to trade him this summer. And the Kings would be, they wouldn't be in a great position to make a competitive offer, but would you be interested in Brandon Ingram?
Sure. And like I say, you wouldn't have room to take him on. So the only way, and I don't know what's going to happen there, but I can't imagine them not at least sign and trade deal with him. I mean, you can't lose an asset like that for nothing just because you don't want to pay him. I mean, I thought that was one of the mistakes of the Kings franchise some years ago when let Bogdanovich walk. Just for money. Because he was an asset. And even if you thought he's had to overpay to keep him, you could have still traded him because there's half dozen teams wanted him.
6 Man of the Year candidate this year.
Yeah. I mean, he's had good, he's had 3 good years there.
Yeah. Brandon Ingram, he's not healthy very much, but that seems to be a recurring theme with some of these guys that the Kings might be in on, huh?
Yeah, that's the risk. And today's game, geez, it's just the injuries are such a factor, and I mean, and nobody gets hurt on purpose, but if you're really counting on a guy, and that's why the Kings have been so lucky to have their key guys like, for the most part, Domas and Keegan and Fox and Monk, they've been healthy. And of course, and that's one of the great things about Harrison Barnes. He doesn't miss games.
Yeah, but as you say, he doesn't get credit for it, does he?
No.
Yeah,
not one bit.
Jerry Reynolds in with us today. It's a drive, guys, and we're just trying to piece together the Kings' moves for this offseason. One thing we agree on is you could get a pretty good player at 13.
Yeah, I think it's an excellent chance of that. I mean, just like say going on history, it also means you could get a total bust too,
right?
Based on history. But some of the best players in the league were picked down there in the history of the league.
Yeah, and just because it's supposedly a weak draft doesn't mean that that's nothing. There's a chance for the Kings to get a really decent to maybe pretty good player there. And you're in the mode now of acquiring young talent, right? Anytime you get a chance for the Kings we can acquire young talent and it's not that expensive, well, then you have to do that. That's where you are right now.
Get more talent. It's a talent league. And really in the West, it's getting more and more of a talent league and a younger talent league. So obviously the Kings, they're looking at Oklahoma City, Minnesota, saying, "Uh-oh."
A lot of teams are looking at those. A lot of teams in the West. Golden State right now, they're also facing a lot of these questions. I know we don't worry about them; they got their own problems, but they're facing a lot of existential questions this offseason.
Yeah,
Lakers.
For a team, Lakers and Golden State, teams that want to compete for championships. Well, they're a long way from the championship contenders. And then you got. I always say it's the other teams now. Memphis is going to get John Morant back.
I know.
They're going to get a bunch of guys back, and they were one of the better young teams 2 years ago. And so you got to think. And then Houston Rockets, at the second half of the year, they were about as good as anybody. And then San Antonio, when Manana they get a couple of pieces with him.
Were you surprised they didn't win more games this year?
Yes,
I was.
Yes.
Okay.
And that's why, I just can't give him quite as much credit. He made them 2 games better. Well, greats of the past had more impact.
Yes. Yes.
And so I'm, it's a wait and see. It's not, what it tells me is that, yes, he can be a great player, an all-star, but he isn't yet. He is not Jabbar. He's not Bird. He's not David Robinson. He's not Elijah Wan or Jordan, James, those guys, because they made their teams anywhere from 10 games to 30 games better.
He takes a lot of bad shots, Jer, if I may nitpick. I'd love to have him. He's phenomenal, but his shot selection to me is a little iffy.
Oh, more than iffy. And it's even the shots. I mean, it's like, say, yeah, he can take and make 25 footers, but 2/3 of the guards in the league can do that and do it better.
That's right. Look at me. I'm a tall guy. I can make shots. Yeah, but just because you can doesn't mean you should.
So we'll be interesting to see what Pop does next year, because I know this was just a play it through the year league, and kind of getting him adjusted, but try to get more talent. They'll have a nice draft pick or to trade or whatever. But
they might have Malik Monk, right? They might.
Well, that'd make them better. Darn it.
Oh, Quake. We'll take. I should.